My sister's apology came 2 months too late, only after my parents moved in with her and she saw their demands firsthand. She admitted I was right about everything, but the damage is done and my trust is a scar. Now she wants us to start over. I'm faced with a terrible choice: forgive her and risk the cycle starting again, or block the last piece of family I have left. I cannot look after your child, my mother declined. You must manage independently now, I messaged, simultaneously revoking every scheduled financial transfer. Upon my arrival on Christmas Day, my father was present. At 31, the foreboding nature of the situation was immediately apparent the instant I witnessed her demeanor. My mother, Margaret, was comfortably ensconced on the sofa with Lisa's children, appearing more robust than she had in numerous months. For an individual purportedly too delicate to supervise my daughter Mia for a mere evening, she seemed to be effortlessly managing my sister's 3 offspring. My resolve crumbled, the entire scene immobilized me. The joyous sounds faltered when they detected my presence in the entryway. My mother's countenance bleached momentarily before she regained her composure, adopting the familiar saccharine expression I had witnessed countless times. Jake! What an unforeseen pleasure. I certainly didn't anticipate your arrival, she trilled, gently bouncing my nephew upon her knee. I was rendered speechless. The wad of currency in my grasp, the supplemental funds I'd delivered for utility costs, felt abruptly like a bar of lead. My gaze flickered between my mother, Lisa's children, and my father, who had sunk deeper into his armchair, deliberately avoiding eye contact. You claimed you were incapable of watching Mia due to your deteriorating health, I finally articulated, my voice strained. The room fell into an eerie hush. My mother faltered, but Lisa, ever equipped with a justification, swiftly leapt to her defense. She has an excessive load, she stated. We wouldn't want her to overexert herself. My blood pressure surged and a visceral throbbing developed behind my eyes. I reiterated her exact words, maintaining a hushed, dangerous tone. She is currently engaged in childcare this very moment. My mother let out a deep sigh, massaging her temple as if my presence were the source of her distress. The acute irony was not lost on me. She attempted to rationalize the situation, claiming it was a distinct scenario, and that Lisa required her assistance, asserting that raising children without a partner is exceptionally arduous. The ground beneath me seemed to vanish. 32 years of subservience and being deemed the inferior option crystallized in that singular instance. I inquired bluntly whether Lisa, who had never contributed to a single household expense in her lifetime, and for whom Mom had consistently gone to extraordinary lengths since our youth, genuinely required her more than I did. Profound silence enveloped us. My father adjusted himself uneasily. Lisa dismissively rolled her eyes. My mother, however, merely shook her head as if my query were patently absurd. It's not like that, she protested, but in stark reality it was precisely like that. My mandible tightened with enough force to potentially fracture enamel. The entire deceptive schema was abruptly illuminated. My mother's alleged affliction had nothing to do with her physical state, it was a tactic for coercion. She was apprehensive about jeopardizing the remittance flow, and thus she fabricated falsehoods, orchestrated a charade, and permitted me to believe she was too infirm to assist, all while depositing my contributions without the slightest pang of conscience. And Lisa was complicit, she had always been aware. Something deep within me snapped violently. The accumulated decades of exasperation, bitterness, and letdown finally erupted. I informed them that my comprehension was now complete. I was never an authentic constituent of this family, merely the contingency plan, the financial safeguard, the gullible resource who maintained their infrastructure while they freely pursued their existence. My mother drew a sharp, exaggerated breath. I interrupted her before she could vocalize a response. This wasn't equitable, she began. No, I countered. What wasn't equitable was me subsidizing their expenditures for countless years while they regarded me as an unimportant afterthought, relying on the pretense that they genuinely required my assistance when the truth was simply that they had no desire to reciprocate my efforts. My mother was a deceiver. Lisa leaned forward, displaying that contemptuous smirk I had grown to despise. She denounced me as overly theatrical, asserting that Mom had to tread cautiously around me because I was so fastidious. I pivoted toward her, my visage unyielding, resolute. I labeled her miserable and dependent. She allowed Mother to pamper her as if she were still a juvenile, and she greedily accepted it because it was more convenient than assuming responsibility for her own destiny. They were perfectly suited for one another. Without another syllable, I pivoted and exited. My mother shrieked my name after me. Lisa hurled a derisive retort. My father, as was his invariable habit, remained silent. I did not pause, I was incapable of doing so. My hands convulsed on the steering wheel, my throat felt scorched. The journey home was a hazy succession of streetlights and traffic signals. By the time I coasted into my driveway, I was certain of my course of action. Aaron was awaiting my return in the kitchen, Mia already soundly sleeping on the upper floor. A single glance at my face was all the confirmation she needed. She inquired about the events, her voice gentle with solicitude. I disclosed the entire account, the babysitting, the duplicity, the conclusive corroboration of what we had both speculated for years. She showed no indication of astonishment. Perhaps a part of her had always surmised the truth as well. She asked my subsequent intentions. I informed her I was simply finished. That evening I experienced a more profound slumber than I had in years. The following morning I terminated every recurring payment, the rental fees, the utility services, the auto insurance, the food delivery subscriptions, everything. Subsequently I dispatched one final definitive message: "You are solely responsible for yourselves now. Best of luck." Then I deactivated their contact information. What transpired subsequently was unadulterated pandemonium. Initially there were the barrages of missed calls, scores of them illuminating my device like a string of holiday lights before I permanently disconnected their access. Following that were the electronic mails, imperative, frantic, and saturated with manufactured remorse. When these also went unacknowledged, they commenced telephoning Erin. She declined every single attempt with a gratification that made me re-embrace my affection for her. Eventually, Margaret decided to make the situation public. She authored a lengthy, maudlin Facebook declaration detailing how her ungrateful progeny had forsaken his frail, ailing mother during her moment of necessity. She graphically elaborated how she had sacrificed everything for my well-being, only to be repaid with malice. I refused to be manipulated. Instead, I composed my own statement, devoid of any dramatic flourish, simply the unvarnished, brutal truth. I had been underwriting their financial obligations for a period of years. My mother had concocted a medical lie to evade supervising my daughter. She had refused an overnight commitment for my child yet was perfectly capable of attending to my sister's offspring. I was no longer available for exploitation. The repercussion was immediate and scathing. Extended family members with whom I had been estranged for years reached out with expressions of solidarity. Friends shared parallel narratives of dysfunctional familial dynamics. Even a number of my parents' proximate neighbors intervened, citing occasions where they had observed my mother engaging in yard work or shopping excursions on days she had professed to be confined to her bed. Lisa endured the most severe backlash. Her meticulously constructed facade as the hard-pressed single parent disintegrated under the weight of interrogations regarding her spending patterns and frequent leisure travels. Then came the climactic confrontation, a peremptory rap upon my front door 3 days later. Peering through the spy hole, I observed them, Margaret and Frank, stationed on my porch, their expressions stricken with desperation. My father's face was drawn and exhausted. My mother's eyes were encircled with redness, though I pondered whether the tears were sincere or merely another calculated display. I hesitated, my hand resting on the door handle. A part of me desired to disregard their presence, to allow them to linger there until they capitulated and withdrew. But an alternative impulse, the segment that had not yet completely detached itself, wished to hear their submission. I unlocked the entrance but maintained my position in the aperture, obstructing their entry. My mother launched immediately into her appeal. Her voice quavered as she implored us to engage in dialogue, reminding me of their parental status. "Then speak," I instructed them, refusing to yield my ground. My father cleared his throat with effort. "Son, your mother is grief-stricken, we both are. We never intended to inflict pain upon you." "You did not intend for me to discover the deception," I amended his statement. "There is a material distinction." My mother attempted to grasp my arm, but I retreated. "Sweetheart, I understand you are distressed, but severing ties in this manner is unconscionable. We are unable to satisfy our rental obligation this month. The electrical provider is threatening to disconnect our service. Is that truly your desired outcome, your parents living in the dark?" The attempted appeal to guilt was so perfectly anticipated, so blatantly obvious, that I nearly emitted a chuckle. "You are not without alternatives," I stated with calm resolve. "Dad is capable of seeking employment. You could downsize to a more modest residence. Lisa could, finally, begin to contribute. Or you may persist in these maneuvers and observe the ultimate consequences." My mother's demeanor hardened. "After all the efforts we've expended on your behalf, is this your chosen method of recompense, abandoning us to the streets? What specifically have you accomplished for me, Mother? Identify one action from the last 10 years that was not fundamentally predicated on what I could provide for you." Utter silence. My father averted his eyes. My mother's mouth opened and closed rhythmically, but no utterance emerged. "Precisely as I anticipated," I declared. I informed them that they had rendered their decision, and they must now accept the repercussions. I closed the door firmly. For the initial time in my existence, I felt genuinely liberated. No more oppressive culpability, no further deceptive schemes, no more pursuing an affinity that was never authentically present. And the sensation was profoundly gratifying. The subsequent weeks were remarkably tranquil. Erin and I escorted Mia to the seaside for an extended weekend reprieve. We initiated the process of house hunting in a superior school district, a possibility we had discussed for years but never pursued earnestly. I also secured a professional advancement, partially attributable to my newfound capacity to concentrate fully without the constant distraction of familial crises. Nevertheless, life is rarely that straightforward. The unwanted hearsay reached me via well-intentioned professional colleagues and distant kinsfolk. My parents were circulating rumors that I had experienced some sort of psychological breakdown. Lisa was broadcasting to all listeners that I had always been unstable and obsessed with monetary gain. My aunt telephoned me one evening. She omitted the customary civilities, immediately informing me that the prevailing narrative was that I had lost my mind. Margaret was apparently relaying to everyone that I was undergoing a midlife crisis. I sighed, leaning back into my office chair. I asked her if she was at all astonished. Not in the slightest, she conceded. She understood my mother's nature. She could not tolerate the forfeiture of authority. My aunt had always possessed the insight to see through my mother's machinations, which was the very reason their contact was infrequent. I inquired about the severity of the predicament. Sufficiently dire, she replied. They were evidently facing imminent eviction within the next month. Frank had attempted to regain his former position at the hardware outlet, but his overtures were rebuffed. Lisa had been soliciting monetary advances from numerous individuals, but people were beginning to decipher the patterns. A minor sensation, not precisely remorse but a similar sentiment, passed through me. I asserted that it was no longer my responsibility, but my voice lacked conviction. My aunt was silent for a moment. She concurred that it was not, and acknowledged that I had performed more than adequately. She simply believed I should be apprised of the circulating narrative. After we concluded the conversation, I remained in stillness, observing the sun setting through my office window. Was I a reprehensible son? A cruel individual? The intrusive uncertainties crept in like advancing shadows. Erin discovered me there an hour subsequent, still gazing into the distance. She inquired about my well-being, perching delicately on the edge of my writing desk. I confessed my ambivalence. One part of me experienced emancipation, but another grappled with guilt. She clasped my hand, her expression solemn. She recalled to me that I had provided for them for years. I had granted them more opportunities than they justifiably deserved. Their sole requirement was to be truthful and to reciprocate the same measure of regard they extended to Lisa. They were incapable of even that. She was correct. I acknowledged the validity of her assessment. I divulged my apprehension regarding what might occur when they were in genuine need of assistance, when they were advanced in age and veritably incapable of self-care. Erin applied pressure to my hand. That is a future complication we will address when it materializes, she instructed me. However, providing support does not equate to tolerating manipulation. There is a discernible difference between aiding one's parents and functioning as their dedicated monetary dispenser. I assented, drawing her onto my lap. I inquired when she had acquired such sagacity. She asserted she had always possessed wisdom. I was simply finally paying attention. 2 months elapsed. Mia successfully mastered counting up to 20, a milestone that afforded me greater delight than any professional advancement could ever achieve. We submitted an earnest offer on a house in a serene locale with highly rated educational facilities. Life was advancing. Then the holiday correspondence arrived. It was delivered on a Tuesday, tucked between utility statements and supermarket promotions. There was no originating address, but I instantly recognized my mother's distinctive cursive. Inside was an impersonal festive card featuring a staged family photograph, my parents and Lisa with her children, all beaming serenely as if nothing untoward had transpired. On the reverse, a singular sentence in my mother's extravagant handwriting: "We miss you." No apology. No acknowledgement of the preceding events. Just 3 words intended to rectify everything. I discarded it into the waste receptacle without a momentary reconsideration. That evening, while Erin and I were ornamenting our Christmas fir, the doorbell rang. I froze, a strand of metallic garland in my grip. Erin volunteered to answer it, squeezing my shoulder as she proceeded. I overheard subdued murmuring, and then Erin reappeared with a look I could not readily interpret. "It's your father," she conveyed softly. "Only him." My father was standing within the entryway, his hands inserted into his pockets, appearing diminished compared to my recollections. His hair had become entirely ashen since our previous encounter, and pronounced creases marked his face. We exchanged superficial salutations. I asked the purpose of his visit. He glanced at Erin, then back at me. He inquired if we could have a private discussion, if only for a brief interval. Erin gave me a look of deference, indicating the decision was mine. I affirmed, and she took Mia upstairs for her bath, leaving us unattended. I directed him towards the living room, and we seated ourselves at opposing extremes of the couch, the partially decorated Christmas tree flickering between us. "Your mother is unaware I am here," he began, staring intently at his hands. "She would be incandescent with rage if she knew." That captured my full attention. "So why the unauthorized visit?" He drew a deep, shaky breath. "Because I owe you a rectification, a genuine act of contrition, not the deceptive rubbish your mother has been attempting." I remained unresponsive. I had been recipient of too many insincere apologies over the years. He persisted, his voice raspy with emotion. He had failed me not merely recently but throughout my entire existence. He passively witnessed my mother's blatant preferential treatment of Lisa. He observed her capitalizing on my generosity without uttering a single dissent. He permitted it all. The unembellished sincerity in his tone took me aback. I inquired why he had never intervened. He scrubbed his hand across his face, suddenly embodying every one of his 68 years. He confessed to being a poltroon. It was simpler to acquiesce to her will than to engage in confrontation, simpler to remain mute than to uphold what was right. He did not anticipate absolution, he would not grant it in my position, but he needed me to understand that I was justified in extricating myself, and he was proud of the fortitude he himself had never possessed. Something constricted in my chest momentarily eased. I asked what their immediate future entailed. They were relocating to Lisa's dwelling, he informed me, with a noticeable frown. This was my mother's directive, not his own. The accompanying irony was that Lisa was equally displeased by the arrangement. It emerged that she had no true desire to assume responsibility for their care. Who could have possibly predicted that? Despite all that had transpired, I felt a slight upturn at the corner of my mouth. Astounding, I deadpanned. For the first time in months, my father also managed to smile, a melancholy, weary expression, yet unfeigned. He stated he needed to depart. His mother would be inquiring as to his whereabouts. I accompanied him to the doorway, unsure of what final sentiment to offer. He lingered on the threshold, then turned back. A blessed Christmas, son. You have a truly beautiful daughter. You are a superior father than I ever managed to be. Before I could formulate a reply, he was gone, laboring through the light dusting of snow back to his vehicle. I closed the entrance, leaning against it, strangely unsettled. I had not foreseen him acknowledging his shortcomings, much less offering atonement. It did not obliterate the past, but it was nevertheless significant. Erin found me still standing there a few minutes later. She asked if I was all right. Yes, I replied, surprising myself with the sincerity of the declaration. I believe I am. That evening, as we applied the final decorations to the tree, I contemplated the notion of family, not the one I was born into, but the one I had intentionally selected. Erin, who loved me unconditionally. Mia, who regarded me as if I were the creator of the cosmos. Even my friends and professional associates who had supported me through everything. They were my authentic kin, imperfect but genuine. We relocated into our new domicile, a unassuming 4-bedroom with a rear garden ample enough for a swing set. Mia celebrated her 3rd birthday with a dinosaur-themed fete that left our kitchen coated in vivid green icing for subsequent days. I occasionally received correspondence from my father, brief, awkward telephone exchanges that neither of us was entirely proficient at navigating. My mother persisted in her refusal to offer an apology, telling anyone who would listen that I was the one who required making amends. Lisa had evidently expelled them after a duration of 2 months, incapable of enduring their incessant demands. They were now occupying a compact apartment sustained by a fixed pension. A facet of me felt vindicated, they were finally confronting the punitive effects of their transgressions. But another part experienced a pang of sorrow, not precisely for them, but for the lost potential, for the relationships we might have cultivated had circumstances been different. One brightly sunlit Saturday, as I propelled Mia on her new swing, my phone vibrated with a text from an unidentified source. It's Lisa. May we converse? I scrutinized the display, uncertain of the appropriate reply. My sister and I had not exchanged a word since that momentous day at our parents' residence. What could she conceivably wish to communicate now? Inquisitiveness prevailed. When and where, I replied. We arranged to meet at a neighborhood coffee establishment the subsequent Monday during my lunch period. Lisa was already present upon my arrival, appearing discernibly altered, less prefabricated, more authentic. She extended her gratitude for my appearance. I directly inquired about her objective. She clutched her hands around her coffee mug, avoiding my scrutiny. I owe you an expression of remorse, she finally admitted. She had been deplorable to me. I arched an eyebrow, awaiting further elaboration. She proceeded to explain how she had assumed the situation would be manageable when our parents relocated into her home. She speculated they would contribute to childcare and perhaps assist with household finances. Instead, they simply anticipated everything. Mom complained about her culinary skills, her parental methods, her domestic management. Dad merely sat inertly, watching television all day. That narrative is exceedingly familiar, I commented drily. She nodded, appearing chagrined for the first time. She now comprehended the exact tribulations I had been enduring. It was utterly draining. After 2 months, she could not tolerate it further. I observed that she had effectively evicted them. I was obligated to, she insisted. They were driving me to distraction. I reclined, studying my sister's countenance. There was a novel element in her expression, a humility I had never before witnessed. I asked her why she was disclosing this information. She sighed, meeting my gaze without equivocation. She confessed that I had been correct on every point. Mom did demonstrate favoritism. She did exploit my resources. She permitted me to shoulder the burden alone because it was more convenient than acknowledging the utter dysfunction of their situation. And she was genuinely sorry. I was uncertain of my expectations for this rendezvous, but it was certainly not this. Lisa had never before extended an apology to me, not a solitary instance in 32 years. I expressed my appreciation for her statement, but noted that one instance of contrition could not expunge decades of ingrained conduct. She readily concurred. She was not petitioning for absolution, she simply needed me to comprehend that she now perceived the reality, what they had inflicted upon me and what she herself had done. She was endeavoring to be a better person for the sake of her children. That particular sentiment resonated deeply, for my children. Despite all the preceding animosity, Lisa was a mother striving to interrupt the detrimental cycle. I inquired if she maintained contact with them. Intermittently, she replied. Mom is unalterably mom, she will never evolve. But Lisa is now establishing firm boundaries, no more ceaseless childcare, no further financial disbursements, no more emotional manipulation. I signified my understanding with a nod, grasping precisely her meaning. I inquired about the welfare of her children, surprising myself with the question. Lisa smiled, a measure of her visible stress dissipating. They are doing well, she informed me. They are active. Jack has commenced formal schooling, and Emma is passionately devoted to soccer. They occasionally ask about their cousin Mia. An uncomfortable lull descended between us. 32 years of intricate familial history could not be rectified over a single coffee meeting. I finally informed her that I could not guarantee we would ever attain genuine closeness. There was simply too much unresolved history. But perhaps we could commence anew, interacting as adults and unencumbered by the inherited baggage. Lisa nodded, her eyes suspiciously luminous. I would sincerely welcome that, she uttered softly. We conversed for an additional 20 minutes about innocuous, non-controversial subjects. Her occupation, my new dwelling, the meteorological conditions. It was not a significant breakthrough, but it was a seminal point. As we were preparing to depart, she turned back to me. She expressed her gratitude once more for the meeting and for my courage in confronting them. If you hadn't, she stated, I am not confident I would have ever recognized the truth. I acknowledged her statement with a nod, not quite prepared to offer a "you're welcome." Walking back to my office, I felt a sense of unburdening. Not because everything was miraculously fixed, it was not and might never attain perfection, but because I had finally achieved liberation from the constricting patterns that had defined my personal narrative for so long. I was no longer the family's automated money machine. I was no longer the neglected son, the dependable individual who never received the deserved recognition. I was simply Jake, husband, father, and a man finally determining his own course. That night, as I tucked Mia into her bed, she looked up at me with her mother's eyes. Daddy, she mumbled sleepily, are you joyful? I pressed a kiss to her forehead, inhaling the sweet fragrance of her shampoo. Yes, sweetheart, I responded. I am exceedingly joyful. And for the first time in my recollection, the statement was absolutely unequivocally true.